Phil here from Dynamically Tanked, and today I'm going to show you how to paint this vibrant green Sons of Medusa Space Marine for Warhammer 40,000 by Games Workshop. Let's get started. In order to get the vibrant lime green for my Sons of Medusa, I first start with a white ink pre-highlight over a black base coat. For the first layer of green, I start with thinned down Boreal Green by scale 75. This layer is fairly thin, as I want to make sure that the contrast from the previous pre-highlight stage still shows through. After the Boreal Green has dried, I go back over the model with another highlight of white ink. I must admit here that I'm not the best airbrush painter actually, and I frequently struggle with getting paint consistency correct when airbrushing. Often, I will use paint that is either too thick and my airbrush is clogged, or paint that is too thin that ends up not actually getting paint on the model. By doing this white highlight though, and then applying a thin green layer on top of it, I have found that I can get a very vibrant and bright green color that pops consistently without a ton of fuss. Next I layer on Errati Green from scale 75 over the entire model to get this nice vibrant green color. If you have seen any of my other videos, I am sure by now you know that I'm a huge fan of using inks in my painting style. I find them very easy to work with through an airbrush due to how thin they are, and the amount of color saturation you get from them is second to none. For this model, I start with the inks by applying a thinned down even coat of chestnut ink over the entire model. I don't know what it is about chestnut ink, but I found that it really makes the green pop and adds a certain richness to them. Next up, I apply 2 layers of thinned down scale 75 green ink over the entire model. This step really juices the green and is critical for getting a vibrant and lively green color. Finally, I add a couple more drops of green ink to my airbrush and shoot some subtle, targeted shadows into the lowest points of the model. The helmet is also painted white at this stage by using some Media Com Art opaque white over a black undercoat. Once the inks are dry, I coat the model in gloss varnish to seal in the inks and prepare the model for the oil wash coming up next. I find that oil washes are an excellent way to add detail and contrast to your model without a ton of extra work, and for this model, I used a burnt umber oil wash to better define the armor panels and to add a bit more color to the model. If you've never used an oil wash before, they are fairly simple to make, as all you need is a tube of oil paint and some odorless mineral spirits, both of which you can pick up from your local craft store. I am a little more careful with this oil wash than normal, as I don't want it to stain the green armor, so I make sure to only dab the wash onto the recesses and depressions in the armor where I want the dark brown to go. Of course though, if you do make a slight mistake here or there, you can simply wipe the oil off, and, worst case scenario, you can cover any discolorations with chipping and weathering later on. I also hit the white of the head with the same oil wash to add some contrast to that as well as tie it in visually with the rest of the model. Once the oils are dry, I use a foam makeup remover to wipe away any oil that has accidentally got outside the recesses and onto the armor. I next give the model a coat of gloss varnish to seal in the oils so they don't rub off, as well as to prepare the model for the decals coming up next. For the decal step, I just put on some decals on the shoulder pads. It's not really much to say here, except you should check out chaptercustomizer.com if you want some sick badab decals. They're not paying me to say this, just the product is the only one out there for these chapters, so if you want them, you either gotta go to them, or get to freehanding. I also give the model a layer of AK Interactive matte varnish to kill all the shine from the previous gloss varnish layers. Generally speaking, I prefer to use sponge chipping on my models instead of edge highlights to define the edges of armor plates. This is mainly because it is a far easier process, but also because it gives the model a much grittier look that I think fits in the aesthetic of Warhammer 40k better than clean edge highlights. When sponge chipping, I normally do 3 different passes. The first is a layer of Rhinox Hide by Games Workshop. This is to represent pits and scratches in the armor that went all the way through to the primer layers or deeper, and even are potentially rusting. Next, I do a layer of a lighter color than my primary armor color to represent scratches and dings that did not go all the way through the paint, but still reflect light differently than the surrounding armor. For this marine, I used a mixture of Errati Green and Birch, a light bone color from scale 75. Finally, I do a very slight chipping layer of bright silver, usually speed metal from scale 75, to represent fresh scratches that have gone through the paint and to provide a little more contrast and definition to the edges of the armor. Taken together, I found that these 3 steps give the model a ton of texture and character with relatively little work. One thing I will call out here though, is it is critical that you dab most of the paint off of the sponge you are using prior to dabbing it on the model. Otherwise, the paint will just smear and look like trash. Next, all of the black parts of the model, including the cabling, bolter casings, and shoulder pad trims, are painted with scale 75 flat black, and then roughly highlighted with scale 75 Caspian blue. I also do a very slight edge highlight here of scale 75 Arctic blue to give a little more visual punch to the black. All that's left now is to paint the metal parts of the bolt gun and the tubes in the head with scale 75 thrash metal, and then wash it all with Nuln Oil. I decided to put this model on a red Martian themed base as I thought that the bright reddish orange of the base would complement the green of the armor nicely. If you're interested in learning how I made and painted this base, please click on the link in the upper right hand corner of the video. After the model is attached to the base, I lightly dust on the lower legs with orange rust weathering powder. This was the same weathering powder I used when making the base, and this step really helps tie the model into the overall environment as opposed to making the model and the base look like 2 separate disjointed elements. I also get a lot of questions about how to seal in weathering powders, and to be honest, I don't. I like the dusty look the powders give, and every sealant that I have found obliterates that look and leaves it a little more matte and less dusty. So leave the powders as they are, and just make sure I don't touch that part of the model when I'm gaming with it. So there you have it, a completed lime green marine ready to blind your opponents from across the battlefield. I'm kind of at a loss for the next tutorial to do, so if anyone has any suggestions on a model they'd like to see, or even unit, please leave a comment below. Also, if you liked the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel grow. I also wouldn't be too upset if you threw a link to this video in your favorite hobby Discord. Thanks for watching, and hobby on.